Okay, everyone, I've got good news and it's going to impact you, but to put it in the right context, I've got to start with a quote from Gabe Newell. This is back in 2012. He said then that Windows 8 was a catastrophe for PC. And he told the press that, of course, Microsoft, who were his former employer, that they needed competition, that they need there to be alternatives. And the good news is that now, 13 years later, they've got competition from Gabe, and now we are armed with new data. Concrete evidence that, like for like, SteamOS is superior, that it beats Windows. It's better in battery life, better performance, and this is all testing not on first-party devices, but on third-party devices, which is honestly massive. So here's the thing, right? As this operating system rolls out to more devices, it's then becoming a viable option for more and more users. What does that mean for Microsoft? It means legitimate competition. Microsoft evidently thinks they need to meet that challenge because now they are acting. But first, we gotta talk about SteamOS being available for everyone and just how good it is. There's another fun thing going on. Vercel's V0 and every no-code tool on Earth have empowered a whole generation of vibe coders. I'm sure you've heard the word. My editors are now making internal tools for our team that previously I need an engineer for. That's awesome, but there's a dragon. It's called Backend, and my sponsor boot.dev exists to help you slay that dragon. And I'm not even being cheesy. Boot.dev is all themed and built as a role-playing game. It's made by a gamer for fellow gamers, and it fits my weaknesses. Coming from C# game development and like my education and background, front end has always been kind of easy mode and intuitive, but wiring databases, doing auth, all that stuff feels like obscure wizardry. That's why I swear by boot.dev. Lane and the team have baked the fun of an RPG, so quests, XP, a guild-style Discord that is super active, into a curriculum that's laser-focused on serious back-end chops. So I'm talking about things like actually understanding data structures, API, auth flows, algorithms, Docker, the whole works. You'll build and deploy a server-client Pokedex, remake asteroids in Pygame. You'll even tackle job search preparation. Basically, as much fun as vibe coding can be, it does skip a bunch of steps that you really should take, and Boot absolutely sorts that. So no more tutorial hell, no more pricey bootcamp hustle stuff, just a structured path that turns all that vibe coding energy into viable engineering that you can actually depend on. And Boot keeps on adding features like, say, the searchable spellbook and constant new content drops, like, for an example, the massive TypeScript module. Pretty huge, and there's a hack to save even more money. If you go to boot.dev/Bellular News, code Bellular News gets you 25% off your first purchase. So buy the yearly plan for the largest saving, and if you don't gel with it, don't worry, because there's a no-risk 30-day money-back guarantee. The first domino to fall in today's story is the exciting one that SteamOS is officially live on third-party devices. So Valve just released the official build for the Lenovo Legion Go S. It's got SteamOS 3.7, and they've also improved it for other handhelds, specifically ones that are using AMD hardware. And what that means for us is fairly big. It means official evidence, because we can now compare how SteamOS performs against Windows on like-for-like hardware, with the only difference being different operating systems. And the good news is that things are looking really good for Gabe Newell's alternative. First off, though, I gotta state the obvious. So the Legion Go S is released 3 years after the Steam Deck, so it shouldn't be surprising that it does have better performance. And Valve have been clear enough about all of this, where basically they frame their device as a hardware baseline, where they're not super interested in hardware refreshes anytime soon. It seems their game plan is basically to expand the size of the market by, funnily enough, allowing for lots and lots of competition by giving SteamOS out to other different vendors. But here's what actually makes the Legion Go S real unique. It's also available in the Windows version. That same hardware, different OS. And that means we can do pure OS level performance comparisons. And they're not good for Windows. The most prominent ones came from Dave2D, and his title pretty much, well, was music to my ears. I've long had an axe to grind against Windows. I'll put my biases up front. And in his video, you see better frame rates, you see better battery life, and it's all in specific comparisons between the two different OSs. And I think for most people in the handheld form factor anyway, the big winner is battery life, because in the less graphically intensive games, you essentially had 2 to 3 hours more playtime on SteamOS. Now, essentially, right, if you are absolutely just maxing out your hardware, just completely going wild, you're gonna drain both of them fairly consistently. But on a less intensive game, well, then you'll be putting the power usage strain in other things, as an example, like the operating system, and that's what we've got here. And it's not just Dave 2D, the Virgin PC Gamer are also finding similar, and well, it's like that across the board. Now, there's not magic here. It's not like SteamOS is literally doing the impossible. It still is very much handheld gaming console performance. You're not going to get 1080 60 out of the box immediately, but what you will have is, out of the box, an almost universally better time on SteamOS. And if you're wondering why, it's actually fairly simple. It's because SteamOS has been optimized at every level for this, even down to things like the sleep and suspend functionality working in a thoughtful way. And it's just all those little paper cuts that exist on, say, Windows 11 for handheld gaming, as I've experienced my ROG Ally. It's just those little paper cuts that make it a fairly shit experience. Now, of course, it's not doomed to be a shit experience forever. Like, adjusting the power draw and doing all of that stuff does actually get you quite a bit closer to SteamOS. I've had a lot of fun doing that in my ROG Ally, but look, if you want big mass market appeal, what you need is just for it to work better out of the box. That is what SteamOS is able to deliver even on hardware not made by Valve. And while Windows 11 plus tweaking can get you part of the way there, it ain't SteamOS. Microsoft clearly knows that, and that's why they're trying to enter that market and actually give competition in a fairly big way. By now, it's fairly obvious that Microsoft agrees with those criticisms, or at least agrees or thinks that those criticisms will be a problem for them. And we know that because they've just unveiled the Xbox editions of the Asus ROG Ally. And what we're seeing in their approach is an attempt to address those problems directly. So, I'll explain the lay of the land here. You've got the base ROG Ally, then you've got the Ally X. Now, both of those use the same hardware framework as the existing ROG Ally, but this one has got one extra button, a little bit like an Xbox controller, and it replicates that device's functionality. But this is not only about hardware. And this is, I think, what matters a little bit more. The real story is how Xbox have adapted their firmware in response to SteamOS. And the biggest change is the Xbox full screen experience. Basically, Xbox say they worked with Asus to rebuild the operating system. Now, it still is Windows, right? So, you know, all the good and all the bad that comes with Windows is going to be there, but there are massive reductions in what the operating system actually does. Now, we got a little bit of clarity on that from Jason Beaumont, who's the VP of Experiences. He told The Verge, "We're not loading the desktop wallpaper, not the taskbar, none of those productivity processes for Windows." So basically, all the gumph, all the background stuff that maybe doesn't need to be done if all you care about is gaming is not going to be happening. You'll get fewer notifications, fewer pop-ups, all that stuff, which honestly sounds pretty good. Now, of course, the thing is, this device isn't actually out yet. We literally cannot run tests, but even now, right, which is a fair bit before this is coming out, which is basically like winter this year, right now they're taking 2 gigs of memory back from the OS, so that's fairly nice for games. They've also got power draw down, 1/3 apparently of the current desktop experience in sleep mode, and then there's actually using the device. So the new Xbox button lets you switch between apps. That's things like Discord, games, launchers, and then in the UI level, we've got this, which is the gaming library, and that really may be the killer app here. So in demos, the Xbox game app could launch any installed game. It would not matter where the game came from, right? So Steam, Battle.net, Xbox itself, all of those can just run from this launcher. Obviously, there's been things that have tried that before. As an example, GOG Galaxy, the idea of unifying everything under one launcher. There obviously were no real incentives for the various other different launchers to play nice with Galaxy. I imagine Xbox have got a little, just a little bit more clout there. But essentially their plan is a full console-like experience happening on one of these handhelds, not, say, SteamOS or, even worse, desktop Windows just being on a handheld. And on top of that, they're doing a few things that I think are clearly designed for mass market appeal. As an example, Roblox comes optimized for it, which may not be super important to you or me, but a terrifying number of people play that game. Also, Game Pass demos are baked in, and Microsoft are planning their own version of Verified for Deck, but basically for Windows handhelds. And it's all quite interesting, really, because this is actually a massive, massive shift. Just a few months ago, Windows Central were reporting that Microsoft's internally developed handheld was actually shelved. So it seems that was actually true, and instead they're leaning on their strength. Funnily enough, the soft that's in Microsoft. And that basically means operating system stuff for their partners like Asus. Essentially, it's them trying to play to their strengths, leverage the likes of Game Pass, and kind of use the fact that they're a really big company with a hell of a lot of games and, quite a lot of bandwidth compared to a more lean outfit like Valve, and do everything they can to keep people from leaving their ecosystem. And that's where, well, there is a fundamental thing. this is Windows. Most things work in Windows. SteamOS is Linux, and not everything works with Linux. I've got to hit you with some context here. Here's May 2025 Steam hardware story, and it really just tells the story for us, because Windows is up at 95.45% of Steam users. That's a lot. And as much as the social media buzz would make you think people are abandoning Windows, no, Windows 11 actually grew by just under 0.5%. As for Linux, well, there is good movement there. It climbed to 2.69% this month. 2. So it's really not that much. But here's the reality here. So Arch Linux 64-bit basically represents SteamOS, and that is just about 0.27% of all hardware. And that is honestly where Steam is just absolutely goddamn mind-boggling. The scale is insane. They've got over 185 million, million monthly active users. So of all of that, Steam Deck is only representing a tiny, tiny fraction of the total PC gaming market. But handhelds actually do tell a little bit of a different story. So according to The Verge and IDC data, 4 million Steam Decks have shipped. Now, if you compare that to the Windows handhelds, they're only 2 million total. So basically, Steam Deck is double the total of all of the Windows handhelds put together. And where it's interesting is, of course, on the strategic level. In the grandest scale, what does Gabe Newell literally want? I mean, he literally told us, back in 2012. He wants more competition, and clearly that's operating system level competition, so he wants Linux to be more important. But obviously, if Linux is going to be an awful experience because your games won't run, then that won't happen. So they built SteamOS to accommodate Windows games. Obviously, they want to avoid the Mac OS problem, because on this thing, damn good hardware, right? But I go onto Steam and half my bloody library doesn't work. That's why, of course, Valve have Proton, so that Linux just works. But it kind of doesn't really, because there is a limit, and it does impact some of the largest games that are out there, and that's anti-cheat. It's a humongous problem. As an example, Fortnite, how many hundreds of millions of people are doing a Fortnite? Apex Legends, even games like Destiny, those games actively say they cannot support Linux, and the reason why is kernel-level anti-cheat. Now, I still see in the comments of my videos people saying, no, I will never install kernel-level anti-cheat. But the thing is, if you actually go to loads of those game communities, they can be ravaged by cheating. Before anti-cheat got good, literally driving droves of people away from these games. Now, of course, this ends up presenting a little bit of a problem for these companies, because if 96% of your audience uses one platform, you really don't need to cater to under 1%. And if you're Apex Legends, that's how you're going to think. And right now, that's how loads of these companies do actually think. But what we need to be careful about is not being all sour grapes about it, right? Because we could all just easily say, oh, we don't play those games. Those are big, mass market, normie games for silly normies. We're true gaming enthusiasts. Why does this matter to me? Yeah, you could say that. It's a bit sour grapes, but it's also strategically bad. I mean, literally, here's a quote from Gabe Newell. I think a lot of people in their thinking about platforms don't realize how critical games are. They're consumer drivers of purchase and usage. And he says that. He means all games, especially ones that are continually massive in Steam. And that extends perhaps especially to ones also played by more casual people. So for SteamOS to reach more than 1% of users, it's going to need to meet everyone where they actually are. That means it's going to need to support those massive, humongous behemoth games. That's basically where Microsoft do have a leg up, because all of those games, well, they run in Windows. And that means that if you want a gaming handheld, and you also want the peace of mind that the big games will be supported on the thing you're going to buy, you're obviously going to buy the Windows version. And that basically is Microsoft's big clapback to Steam, because Steam have obviously not been able to find some sort of, magical Proton for anti-cheat. I'm not a low-level engineer, but honestly, that sounds half impossible anyway.